And a few of these ideas filtered through, I have to say, as well as other things in the bath. Now, I've got my sort of 3 stages again here.
Okay.
And I was just looking at the trends as far as we know them. And this is a very personal view. It's not science. As Mrs. M said, it's a bunch of opinions and a conversation starter, really. And I think where we are now in the timeline of migration to Portugal is out of obscurity. I mean, I'm hoping to interview Paul Luckman of the Portugal News, the founder. Don't know if he's the editor still, but he's the founder of the paper. And I think he came here as a kid in the 70s, and he's been here 50 years. That's quite exceptional for anyone to have been here, 50, 40, 30 years. Obviously, people did. They came to work, they came to live, but in quite small numbers. And I think certainly since we came, or when I was first thinking about coming, over 12 years ago, before I met you, I hadn't heard
with a different redhead, right?
With a different redhead. I hadn't heard of Portugal as a place to come to. It had to be suggested to me. And a lot's changed, isn't it? We came, and that changed a little bit in the time that I was planning to come. And even 5 years ago when we first came, it's not as it is now, is it? Would you agree, Mrs. M?
Yes,
it's changed drastically in the last 5 years, hasn't it? Or accelerated in the last 5 years. So I'm making that claim that I think Portugal, it's all relative, of course, but I think Portugal is out of obscurity well and truly now. And he's on, with the sort of articles that we were looking at there of Forbes and every other award and, expat guide, Portugal features and figures well in these. So we're out of obscurity. That's the first point. Certainly we're at the threshold now of property price inflation, easy for you to say.
Yeah.
So that's happening, isn't it? And that's certainly, we were talking about the golden visa before, and the golden visa's changed a little bit because of this, because of the inflation of prices, the sort of globalized effect of gentrification in Porto and Lisbon. And in the Algarve to some extent, so the golden visa has been adjusted to take care of that. So we're in that as well. It's not like you can come here and get an absolute bargain anymore in some of the bigger places. I think you can elsewhere. You have to shop around a bit more. But the good old days of really good value property may well be behind us, unless of course there is some other kind of phenomenon that takes place, and that suspected. The suspicion that Portugal might be among the first, if there is a property bubble bursting, that Portugal might be the first to go. So that could change this, but I think we're in that certainly. The prices have risen, and people aren't getting the bargains they used to. Would you agree?
They're not as competitive as they once were.
No,
is what
exactly.
I'd say,
Yes. And my way of saying that is the prices have gone up.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
But then again, so they have where people have come from as well, haven't they? So if you're moving from the United States and
it's all relative.
It is all relative, no question. And we are certainly on the US radar, and this program itself is a good indication of that. And when we first arrived here, we didn't know many American people who were moving here, apart from people who'd come here to do startups and not to retire, as I recall. And
we saw lots of British expats and
Germans
and Europeans, really,
and the beginnings of the Brazilian, the higher numbers of Brazilians coming, of course, and they are Portuguese by virtue of the colonial past. So who's here then? Talking of Brazilians and Germans and so on, and I have my classifications of the people who are here, and I will give my view of what I think their chances are. And again,
I'm interested in this.
Yes, thank you. And it is opinion. It's not, and it's it's suggestion and conversation starter. It's not by any means a survey that I've done, but it could be. It could be that. And if we dwell on who is here, you'll see on Wikipedia. This is the data. The most recent data is 2020, and in that year, nearly 200,000 Brazilians came, and nearly 50,000 United Kingdom folks. Why'd you say yikes?
That's a lot.
Do you feel we're a bit overrepresented?
Yeah, maybe.
In certain parts.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe.
Cape Verde, of course, a former colony. Romanians, and the Romanian move of many Romanians around the EU, I guess Portugal just reflecting that. Ukraine, of course, 2020. Although that sounds quite early, doesn't it? From When was the first major influx of Ukrainian people evacuating? I'm not sure. I didn't think it was 2020. I thought it was later than that. But anyway, nearly 30,000.
It was last year, wasn't it?
I thought so. But so there, this will have changed, of course.
Yeah.
But it gives you a sense of the trend. Angola's in there as well.
I know there's a lot of free Portuguese Ukrainian language supports
Absolutely,
that were put in place last year.
Yep. Yeah, when the major evacuation began. Yeah, and you'll see there are some old friends of Portugal here, of course, Venezuela. You'll have people coming from all over the world. But interestingly,
I'm surprised the Netherlands is so, and Belgium right at the bottom.
Look, and no US figures.
Oh yes,
in that list. Yeah. Until I scroll down a little bit more.
Oh wow.
So we've got United States there in 2020 at under 5,000 people. Yeah. Which I think is amazing, because there is this great worry, isn't there, among Americans? Are too many of us coming? This is what we hear. Are too many of us coming to Portugal? And I think it's not that there are many of you coming. It's just you are so concerned about it, and you're among the most introspective and concerned about this. Now it has gone up. I think I've heard estimates of 6,000.
Well,
and 8,000.
That article you're reading said in terms of visits, it had gone up 300%.
That's right.
But I mean, that's all relative. If you're talking 300% of 5,000, I mean that will shift it, but it's still not going to shift it that much. That was
holiday interest.
Yeah.
But I think that's still an indicator of the great American.
Like if it was only like 5 people visiting and 300%.
Yeah, and
it's not going to be a huge.
Up to 15. Yeah. Okay. So these are the kinds of people that I've identified. As I was thinking, what sort of people are coming? And I use my standard phrase here. What's next? And what do I think are the likelihoods for these people, whether they're going to come and stay or go in the future? Workers coming over, and we're seeing increasing numbers of people coming from Pakistan to do hard labor, basically. Yeah, and those
really
sort of
working
workers,
on the grounds and stuff, aren't they?
and workers coming from Brazil. We're talking to our favorite cafe owner, and Brazilian people come over. And it's made easier because of the Portuguese and Brazilian connection,
and the language.
And his complaint was there's a kind of scheme whereby people come to get a job, get the job, and then move on. So he had this problem of people of getting people started who appeared to want to work with him, but were just using his first offer as their offer to get residency, and then they would move on elsewhere. And you can't blame them for that, but that's the kind of disruption that's going on, and it's on quite a great scale, I think. And it's very likely, then, isn't it, that the workers of that kind, and I don't put us in this particular category. I'm talking about, people who've come to do jobs rather than be self-employed employees. I
don't know many Brits that have come over to work. I mean, a lot of the ones.
Any?
Yeah, I do, but they've all got their own companies.
That's what I mean.
I don't know any that
have got a job. Have been offered a job and taken a job.
Most I can't think of any apart from people who are working at the embassy and things like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe people who have dual nationality.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, and I think lurker. Am I a lurker? Well, you can decide for yourself with this. But clearly, those people who've left Brazil, for example, or India or Pakistan, and want to come and work in Portugal to better their chances, may well stay and do that, right? So, and that's not really our community, is it? It's not that we don't want those people in our community. It's just that we seem to have settled or not coalesced. These are bad words to use, aren't they? But our community is formed from people who've retired, largely speaking. That's the kind of demographic. So we're not necessarily attracting many people into the community. And actually,
when you're talking our community, do you mean
the Gumpers? The Gumpers of Good Morning Portugal. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people who've retired, and a few who are coming over because they're digital nomads.
And if you're fruit picking or working in a cafe, you're probably not going to be able to watch the Good Morning Portugal show.
No, you're going to be too exhausted to do that.
And I think they'll stay. I think their trend is to stay and make lives here family reunification, and make a life in Portugal, because it's, you know, coming to Europe and taking advantage of that particular situation, and why not?
Yeah.
Then I've got the shifters and drifters, which I originally called grifters and drifters until I looked it up, and it was too harsh a term. But these are people who are maybe within the golden visa and NHR categories, and who you see on certain YouTube channels, who are here for their best financial advantage. And I think if it doesn't work in their favor, which I fear it might not, after the end of their non-habitual resident tax period, and their tax goes up, which it will, and to some eye-watering level here in Portugal, then they'll probably go to the next best place that will have that happen for them. So I think I don't think that sort of person stays after the financial advantages run out.
I think
so they're likely to go.
I mean, that's true of pretty much. Sorry.
No, there's a fly. The fly is back.
I think that's true. You know, that it's not just that they're leaving Portugal, they'll be leaving the next country and the next country and the next country.
Oh yeah, it's not personal.
Yeah.
Panama, Ecuador, it's going to be where they can go and get the best bang for buck.
To be fair, Carl, I mean, one of the reasons we moved to Portugal was to enjoy more time with our children. You know, we're older parents with really young children, and we wanted to be able to work part-time and afford a life, and spend time with our kids, and that just wouldn't have been possible in the UK, would it?
It wouldn't. It also contributes to this particular picture as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes. No, yeah. I mean, we wanted to have more time with our children.
Yes.
And have a great place to raise them in, and we needed to find somewhere that was much cheaper for us to be able to just work part-time.
No, I'm concerned. You might think I'm sounding critical of people here.
No. Okay. I'm kind of just trying to, you know, kind of pop it into context.
Yeah. Because I think we're somewhere in between workers and the next category, which I think is what you're alluding to here, which are the spiritual refugees. Now, I'm sticking my neck out a bit here, but I'm meeting more and more people for whom Portugal is a place of refuge in terms of quality of life and mental health and well-being. They are coming from places that they feel are crazy.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that. And immediately before meeting you, if you don't mind me sharing this,
what is it you're going to share?
I was living in Bali and met a lot of spiritual refugees there, you know, who are also shifters and drifters.
Yes. What trust?
There are lots of trust fund babies who have parents, and you know, wealthy parents, and their parents say, right, here, have a wad of cash.
Yes.
Go and find yourself.
Like your mum and dad did, right? No,
just clear off. Don't darken our door anymore.
Yes. Oh, you're back.
Okay. But one thing that I've noticed is since I left Bali, a lot of my pals have, you know, there's lots of people who do tours to places that seem to attract a lot of spiritual people or spiritually inclined people. And there are, you know, quite a few core places like Costa Rica, Hawaii gets a lot of interest, India and Tibet, obviously, Nepal and all that. But Portugal is one of these places that so many people go to.
Well, and more so, right?
Yeah.
That to me is what is interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is our niche as far as I'm concerned.
And they also, you know, a lot of these people will live in maybe one place for 6 months, and then, you know, a lot of them are digital nomads.
Yes.
And, you know, they're less attracted to a culture and a nationality and a particular language and this, that, and the other. You know, they kind of feel like they belong to the world.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want ownership of that. You know, they just want to be able to move freely. And so there's a lot of people like that. In particular, people who are like coaches and healers and like yoga instructors and so on and so forth.
The proverbial people who buy a pile of rocks in central Portugal and want to start a retreat centre.
Yes, and if we'd had that money at the time, we'd have done the same.
Although things, you see, that's the interesting thing. That's what I was thinking of 15 years ago.
Yeah.
and that's what you and I were thinking of 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We came to do it 5 years ago.
Well, we didn't come to do it because
but things have changed.
we
is
could
the
already
point I'm
see
making.
that, you know, there were lots of people doing that anyway.
And things have changed, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, what you might call spiritual people and spiritual refugees now is, for me, a much broader bracket. It's not navel gazing, esoteric hippie types who are living on the margins of society. The whole point of you know, moving so that you're in a more fruitful, nourishing place for your mental health, I would say falls into the realm of spiritual refugees as well. And I meet more and more people like this.
Lifestyle refugees, because I think spiritual, you know, gives the idea
It's a
that it's
tricky
like
word, isn't it?
It's people who, you know, oh, wow,
meditate,
do
yoga.
But there's also a lot of preppers, you know, people who
so they
people
work
who
lifestyle,
are
well-being, and spiritual refugees.
I mean, because we were more in the prepper category. You know, like when we were in the UK before leaving the UK, for about 5 years before, we were just looking and thinking, how long can this economy keep getting propped up for? And the banks propped up, and we were looking at a lot of world events.
10 years
and just
seems to be the answer to that.
And just like really looking at you know, different trends in terms of expectations in the way you run and raise your family, and how you know, it's almost like lots of freedoms were getting sewn into a particular lifestyle.
Yeah.
And we were looking for a lot more flexibility in terms of how we run our family. And it felt like the culture that we were leaving would be collapsing at some point. And maybe we're about 5 years too early, because it looks like it's happening now.
And it doesn't go in the way you think it
no.
will. And I don't
in fact, it's been going for like all our lifetime, hasn't it?
I don't want us to sound alarmist.
No.
I don't want
well, that's the funny thing. It's like when we're moving over, there was a little bit of alarmism in our thinking.
Yes.
But now we're here, we just recognize that pretty much everyone's in the same boat. And of course, we are realizing that you know, I think one of the reasons why so many people are leaving the US is there are lots of people on believe it or not, both sides of the political debate.
They have the same reason to move.
They are moving for the same reason.
Yes.
And we speak to all of them.
Yes.
And we hear their arguments, and we hear their reasoning, we hear their concerns. And I swear to God, you wherever, you know, I've heard people saying, you know, their reasons for moving, you're moving for the same reasons.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
From our perspective.
Yeah, from our perspective, obviously not being in the States, you know, the people that we're hearing are really worried about the way America's going.
Mrs. M, I think you quite like my little presentation.
I do actually.
Yes, thank you.
So
very
come
much.
on, talk to me about the Lurkers.
Okay. From the morning show, there are the workers and lurkers. So people who are pretending to work, just lurking in the background, tuning into the show. It's not those sort of lurkers. I think there are people who aren't as purposeful as the shifters and drifters, who are very focused on getting the most out of their investments and pensions and so on. Mm-hmm. These are the people who have just drifted here to the least worst place they can find. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't mean, I'm not making a judgment about any of these people. I'm just identifying the different motivations that I see. But there are people who haven't come for that mental health reason. There are people who've come to extend their pension, you know, their relative cost of living. They might be on a British pension, and that goes a lot. Well, 5 years ago,
we've seen Americans do the same, haven't we?
We have.
They've come out to make their pensions work better, and also the healthcare, you know, is so much in America.
And these people are a bit vulnerable though, because if they're not living on, or if they're not actively working on investments or business, and they've just got this fixed income coming in, and they found themselves a least worst place to be, and the relative cost of living is better. If that changes, they are lurking in a less and less attractive environment. And again, if there's no judgment in that, that is just what is possible.
Well, and that there is that trend that's happening, you know, that wherever you are in the world right now, that you know, if we're fish in a fish tank, that it's feeling a little more crowded, a little less luxurious.
Yeah. And so these are just.
But I mean, that's capitalism, isn't it?
These are yes, these are different points of view.
Yeah.
And I would say the lurkers are kind of stuck as well in a way, and this is a problem, isn't it? You can find yourself stuck if the ratio, if your cost of living ratio gets to a point where you don't have surplus cash,
Yeah.
and you've just got enough to make ends meet, then you're stuck where you are, and that brings another kind of dimension to the
yeah,
term
like when we
lurker.
were thinking about kind of downshifting, I was thinking, wow, if we get used to the Portuguese economy, we probably could never afford to
Exactly.
move back to the
Well,
UK.
exactly like that.
And
Yes.
that's become a problem.
And I think there are lurkers like that of all nationalities here in Portugal.
So people that come out, it doesn't go in the way that they want, and they end up staying because they can't return
Exactly.
home. Right. Okay.
Exactly. Unless by some, incredible quirk or desperate act. But yes, basically exactly those sorts of people. And I think, roughly speaking, these are the.
I might have called them. I don't know. I think I'd call them something else. I don't know, like
something you don't want to say out loud.
No, it'll come to me. I had the word and it's gone.
Okay.
Let us know what we should call the lurkers.
Okay. I think it'll be hard to leave, says Carl, after your NHR status expires. You come here for that reason, then make a life here, maybe get married, have kids, make friends, and start businesses. I would hope so. Yeah. Absolutely, I would hope that is the case, and I'm sure you're right. It's like I lived in a university town in the north of England. The quality of life there was so good that people went to university there and then lived there for the rest of their lives. You could well be right, but I think for the hardest nosed people who've come here specifically for tax advantages and have planned it really rigorously, if they get a better offer, they'll go. And then there are those people you're talking about, Carl, I think, who are in a grey area in between. It's like they might fall in love, start a business, love Portugal, and they'll think, okay, I'm prepared. I see what my tax gets me here. I'm prepared to. I'm converted to paying more tax as a way of life, and because I have children here now, I can see that absolutely happening here. In terms of spiritual refugees, I'm in a suburb of a small city, and I don't. Do you know what? I'm embarrassed to say, Mulher de Sete Seias, the Lady of the Seven Skirts. I don't know where you live.
Yeah, I was just about to say, where are you living?
And there's at least one homicide every week. My suburb is safe. Only 3 murders 3 years ago. And that would be somebody who wants to move away from that, right? The spiritual refugee. One of my reasons for returning to Portugal again and again is to boost my sanity. There's another one. There's another spiritual refugee or spiritual tourist. And I'm using spiritual in a broadest sense, again, non-judgmentally, but it's for want of better words. Carl and Luis, a question. Could you do a series of shows comparing moves to Portugal versus France, Italy and Spain? We're looking at all.
You know what? Maybe we could speak to people who
Spain.
Yeah, we could speak to Stuart, and we could find some people from other countries to talk with.
Raf would probably do Italy for us.
Yeah, and I've got I know people in France that are moving to Portugal.
Criteria OLP on that. What index or ratios would you be looking at for the comparison? But yeah, that's not out of the question at all.
Definitely not.
What's that? They did one this week, Spain. Well, we'll get Stuart back and we'll go head to head because I think Stuart will be up for that. Same for me. I may not be able to buy back into the US. There you go. That's the lurking thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm considering keeping my house and renting it out. Quem sabe? I know several people who moved to Portugal, lock, stock and barrel, who are now stuck financially, cannot return home. Same in Spain. These are the lurkers.
There we go.
There we are. And so if I move on to the next part. So what's needed then? And this kind of leans into what you're saying, Carl, about people staying. And the question I'm asking when I'm saying what's needed is what's needed to make Portugal a more attractive place in the long term. And we mentioned this before, didn't we? And this, of course, is a great opportunity for us to go all Munson's money moment now. Okay, let's get the ad break out the way. If you're moving your big currency around, get a Spartan FX account. Okay, it's free. And they're really good. They are well loved. Munson's money moment, and let's roll that because when I said to you we're going to do a Munson's money moment tonight, Mrs. M, you said let's talk about tax. It's really important, isn't it? Like you said, that people get in on a practical level, get their taxation, finance, wealth management things sorted out very early on.
Yeah.
And I would say we need businesses, we need help for expats that helps people do that. I mean, I've been cooked alive by the finances and IRS here
And I'm about to be.
because of a mixture of my own incompetence and being in a foreign environment and an impenetrable taxation system, which even Portuguese people make a lot of fun of, and those three factors have made it very difficult. And it's not a complaint, it's there are far worse problems to have.
Yeah.
But I foresee that in the future, help is needed, a support service to help expats engage with the taxation system. And I would like to see a little bit of toing and froing with the system itself to make it easier for expats to engage. Otherwise, the word's going to get around and people aren't going to start businesses, or they're going to go elsewhere. It's just going to become so ridiculous that people aren't going to do it. So I think wealth and taxation stability is an area for improvement, not just for the country, but definitely for the country. And certainly that people need to be hyper vigilant themselves when they come and attend to that. I was having a conversation about this earlier on in the week about how, you're going to live somewhere warm and carefree. You don't really want to be like that about your finances, because the country, the government won't reciprocate.
No, they really won't.
So services are required to help people engage with taxation. When you start a business, you don't go into it to be an administrator. I mean, 20% of people do, and they love numbers. The other 80% just want to get on with their professional thing and not really worry too much about that. And if you don't worry about it, you'll get yourself in hot water and deep doo-doo, as we've done, right, Mrs. M?
Yeah. And I mean, we're lucky. We will sort it out, and we're dedicated to sorting it out, and we have to anyway.
Yeah.
But for instance, I've just found out that the original advice that I got from 2 different accountants wasn't exactly the best advice. And so currently, I mean, and if I'd known this when I first started, I may well have set my company up a little bit differently, or my consultancy and my pricing. But now all of a sudden, from 4 days ago, I now need to add in 23% onto everything that I'm doing as a consultant in a way that I just wasn't expecting.
That's quite a big
that's a massive
change,
price hike for all of my regular clients,
or something you have to absorb yourself.
And I obviously I can't afford to absorb it myself. So
Mrs. M, it's 2:00 in the morning.
I may well lose a lot of my business and need to repurpose it. And do that just to be able to pay the tax. But I'm not actually that worried. We'll get it sorted.
37 more slides.
Okay. But yeah, just get really up straight. I mean, I know you're in a rush and you're saying it's 2:00, but I would also say you have to be absolutely dedicated to resolving the things you don't like to do. And we were using things like language and then there were masks, and I didn't want to go into a tax office or into any office, actually any official office, and talk to people with masks on, because
and they changed things halfway through,
because not because of anything to do with masks necessarily, but because I felt like I couldn't hear people. I couldn't lip read. I felt blind. I felt like I'd lost one of my senses. I found the whole thing really confusing. And, if you're already anxious about it, I really suggest that you do something to manage your anxiety,
because none of that
so that
is
you
going to
go
stand
and
up.
do it.
None of that is going to be a defense against paying you what they think you're liable for.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say, oh, sorry, I had panic attacks.
No.
But that's how I was feeling. Like when I went to see one of our tax people, I was hyperventilating before going in, wasn't I?
You were.
He steadied me with a kiss.
Yes,
so,
that's right.
Yeah.
Which is not a service I can offer everybody.
No.
I'm sorry.
But you know what? That might be how we earn money.
Or kissing people before they go into the accountants and finances.
Yeah.
I don't know. Talking of bacteria, as we were earlier. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
So wealth and taxation, better support, better insight, better awareness is required, I think, for the long term, for really successful migration into Portugal. And of
Mm.
course, there are firms that help with this already. But I think for the non-super wealthy, and people who just want to start basic businesses and work for themselves, and for this kind of people who just tend to turn a blind eye to these sorts of things, you've got to deal with it. And I think some good firms and a new kind of service to support those people would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Aging, dying, and wills. This is another thing that definitely needs dealing with here in Portugal. We're at a stage now where there's a concern about how am I going to be looked after in old age, and we've dealt with that firsthand, haven't we? We've seen, people who came here 20 years ago are aging, and they might have accidents, they might need end of life care.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sparse provision. You have to be very inventive at the moment. And can you imagine going into an old folks home that's fully Portuguese speaking because you can't afford, a 5-star Algarvian gated old folks home? This is a serious consideration. It's not something we want to think about alongside, dying and the wills and the funerals, and we're doing our bit to address this with Mama Bear and Care and Share Portugal. But all of this needs really rigorous and thorough attention, and I think we'll get better as more and more people engage with it. Your will, if you don't have like a 2-part will that says, that is a Portuguese will that says the will from my original country is the one I want followed, you may well find yourself in the Portuguese system regardless of what you said in your original will. And that's if you have a will, because there are some expats here who don't even have wills. Hey, Mrs. M.
Yeah.
And need to get that sorted out.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, really. So these are things that need facing up to. And isn't it interesting? It's like death and taxes.
Yeah.
that we've got on the screen there, the certainties of life.
Yeah.
And the final one, which is not death and taxes, and a little bit more positive, is what I've described as new ways of living. And as well as people coming here as spiritual refugees, if you like, for peace of mind and a different quality of life, I think we need to live in new ways. And I don't quite know what they are yet, but they're not the ways that lead to the separation, isolation, and anxiety of being an old person. Because the way we live at the moment it just creates that, doesn't it? So I think we need to find new ways of communal living. We need to find ways of sustainable living. And this, I think, is it's part of our long-term view, isn't it? Is we came here to live in a new way.
Yeah.
And I think this is part of the spiritual refugee conversation, is that people think about living in outside the models that currently exist that seem to cause a lot of the problems that we create for ourselves.
Yeah.
So you're defocusing there a little bit, Mrs. M. I can see that across the room here. What's on your mind?
Yeah, we do need to think about a will, don't we?
Did I get you with that?
No, it's fine. I mean, these are all things that, when you're optimistic about your new life and thinking, yeah, I'm going to move, you don't want to talk about it. And Dougie's just put on financial matters depress me utterly. It leads to talking about my death.
Yeah. And this is why we don't.
Yeah, when people get like utterly depressed, it's something that we just don't focus on.
It shuts down, doesn't it?
Yeah, we shut down on it. And I think it's really important to really face your fear, actually.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it becomes more and more of a problem. It just gets bigger and bigger. And of course,
well, all things you don't attend to.
Yeah, but I mean,
one
of the things that I've noticed, as somebody living, away from my country of origin, is when you do have problems, they are so much harder to get over in a new country.
Yeah.
Like you don't have the same support that you might have in your own country. Even if you don't have friends, you've at least got your original language.
Isn't that
it's
interesting?
difficult.
Isn't that interesting? Because it might be that being an expat is a bit like money or alcohol. There are things in life that are magnify, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I always find with alcohol, it magnifies my sense of value, importance, sexual prowess, all these sorts of things. And money can do that for people as well. It can magnify things. It can make things better. And on the other hand, it can make things worse, just like alcohol. It's kind of extreme, isn't it? So it can really boost you, but it can also shrink you, so as it were.
Yes.
And the same in money. And I think it's the same with living abroad, isn't it?
Yeah.
When it's going well, it's beautiful.
Mm.
But as we've discovered, in speaking to some people and seeing what can happen as well, when
Mm.
it goes wrong, like you just said, you don't have your normal, regular reference points,
No,
landmarks,
you don't.
support systems.
You really don't.
So it could go
And to be
quite.
fair, I mean, I think the reason why a lot of people do leave countries, I mean, if you were to go back to all of the people, all of the different types of people like lurkers, spiritual refugees, etc., etc.,
Mhm.
you would also probably find that a lot of these people are way showers or outsiders, or there's very few people who absolutely love their life in their country of origin that just decide to move to another country. Most people who come to another country, they're doing it because they maybe don't fit in, or they're just ever so slightly different. They're quite they're system breakers.
Yeah.
They're not conforming. You get a lot of non-conformists moving to another country. So yeah, I mean, maybe they are actually better equipped to deal with problems, but I do know there's a high incidence of
Because
people.
they're resourceful and
Yeah, because that maybe they are thinking slightly differently to people who have conformed more to where they actually come from, and they're very happy where they are, and they've got their peers around them, and it wouldn't even occur to them to move.
Yeah.
Some people grow up in the same town and stay there their whole lives, and
Yep.
and they don't even want to go anywhere else because that is absolutely what they desire.
Yes.
There is something about an expat mindset.
Yep. And we've
But maybe people don't have that sense of belonging. Like if you had that sense of belonging, there's no way you'd move, right?
True. And in the moving opens these cans of worms that we've touched on tonight. So perhaps profound, poignant, a little bit depressing, but they are things that need to be dealt with. And we're doing our best to provide the backdrop for those sorts of conversations and putting ourselves through those processes as well.
Yeah,
it's really important.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been very fortunate, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this. We when we moved, we had not very much money,
and we've got most of it left.
Like most people, when they come over because they've sold a house, or they've got loads of savings and they already have remote work and they know how they're going to fund themselves. We really didn't.
Yes.
And we are quite unusual in that. We're quite gung-ho, and we've got small children, so we've been building up our life on the fly.
Yep.
And building up our businesses, and transitioning like from one way of life to another.
Yeah.
And I'm really not ashamed to say it, because if we'd stayed in the UK, we'd have both, at that time, we'd have both needed to work full time, maybe me having 2 jobs, and our kids would have been in daycare, and we just wouldn't have enjoyed life in the same way. So we really took a punt, we really took a risk, and it has paid off, but it's a lot of work when you're having to start everything up from scratch. And we have done it, and we're okay.
Yeah,
we've
absolutely.
made it. But our relationship has been really strong, and it's actually got stronger, I would say, through going through all these ups and downs. We I think we could have been homeless at one point, and thankfully, because of the strength of your networks, Carl, there was somebody with a house, or a really old hotel that needed some work doing in it, and there we were. We weren't homeless.
That sounds such a Hollywood story, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, well, you know what?
Honey, I bought a zoo sort of thing.
Yeah.
Honey, I bought a hotel.
Yeah, I mean, because of the way we moved, which was kind of chaotic, but also exciting and also a bit romantic, yeah, it's probably quite filmic. But
We've
like
come
when
a
you
long way to have a 3-year tenancy.
When you move under those conditions, then you have to expect quite a lot of upheaval and a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend us do that again necessarily. And the great news is we're providing for ourselves, and we know we can do it. And yes, we got into a bit of a pickle with our taxes, and we still know we can probably do it. So we're in a much stronger position. But if we hadn't paid attention, it could have gone really spectacularly
think
wrong. We've been very
I
fortunate.
think the tax system here loves my fines and interest that I pay.
It probably
So
does.
much so that they gave me a residency card. It's like
Yeah,
it's like a
yeah.
taxpayer's loyalty card I was given this week. Anyway, let's
I hope you don't mind us sharing that. I mean, you
No.
know, like, you
Not
know,
one bit.
it's very easy for us to like sit here and people think, oh yeah, they must have their shit together. Wow, they must be really
Why would
great.
anyone watching me every morning think that? Honestly, what me and Mrs. Hughes have is a mirror will. I don't know. I know we haven't got to specify which country we pay it in, but equally important to sort. Yeah, just check, make sure that's the case, Doug. By the way, thanks for tonight's show. It's giving me. And by the way, thanks for tonight's show. Good advice. Okay, good advice. Much appreciated. It's our pleasure.
Bless
Carla Lewis,
you.
this is a really nice bit of advice from the lady of the 7 skirts. Make a simple will right away and take it to the notary. €200, and you can fine tune it later. That's a great suggestion.
That's a good suggestion. And that would be one of the ones, you know, where you just feel the fear, you just do it anyway, because it's better to have something, even if it's not brilliant, than to have nothing.
Correct.
Thank you.
And that won't necessarily be everybody sat in front of a video cassette, will it? I mean, that's how in my mind, if I'm having a will, that's how I want it. But it'll be a live stream, kind of. It'll be on the screen. It's like, it'll be like this. Thank you all for being here, even though I can't be.
And even though I've got nothing to give away.
That's right. The last joke is on you. Thanks for flying out to Portugal, because I got nothing for you. Okay, Michael's here. Look, thanks, guys. Very informative and fun. Learned about bacteria, mold, lurkers, fresh green wine, fermental death, imports of having. Oh, superb!
You really were here for the whole show.
Good value.
Thank you so much for not leaving us.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll end on a really nice note here. Right? And this is you know, these things are important, but they're not that important, are they, in the scheme of things? They have their importance in your sort of living life. But let's come back to why we love being in Portugal.
Yeah.
And a celebration of that. This is the Fisher Foge, which I'm going to leave you with.
This is nice.
You like this, Mrs. M?
Yeah,
is there anything you want to say before we conclude tonight?
No, just thank you. Thank you for being here with us. I really think these things are co-created, you know, so like Carl and I have just been feeling quite obviously open, and we've had this really sort of real and vulnerable chat, but that couldn't have happened were it not for the comments that you've put in, and maybe the energy of who you are, everyone that's watching. Obviously, I'm a bit of a hippie at heart, but, you know, I just think the right show has happened tonight. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. There you go, OLP, Monday night, 8 o'clock, when we'll be drinking the rola, which is, as we said earlier on, is Brazilian for Willie. Thanks so much for your late night love. There's another
we're gonna
radio
have some more
show
in a minute, hopefully.
A radio show idea. Thank you very much.
I need to have that the anniversary kiss. I want the kiss that you wooed me with 12 years ago. 12 years ago today, when we actually met in
it was
person.
It was as I was seeing you into are you talking about in the lay-by along the 303? Or okay, you're not talking about the peck as you got into the car where people shouted out, get a room.
I mean, that wasn't a peck, that was a proper full-on Frenchie.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, as you were getting into the car.
Yeah.
And some passers-by in Salisbury said, get a room. Yes, okay, that one. Okay, all right. Here's the Fisher Foge, everybody. Thanks for being here
Have
today.
a great rest of weekend.
See you next Saturday, and we'll see you in a week, of course. Bye for now.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye night.